To hear about Krishna from Vedic literatures, or to hear from him directly through the Bhagavad Gita, is itself righteous activity. And for one who hears about Krishna, Lord Krishna, who is dwelling in everyone's heart, acts as a best-wishing friend and purifies a devotee who constantly engages in hearing of him. In this way, a devotee naturally develops his dormant transcendental knowledge. As he hears more about Krishna from the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, and from the devotees, he becomes fixed in the devotional service of the Lord. By development of devotional service, one becomes freed from the modes of passion and ignorance, and thus material lusts and avarice are diminished. When these impurities are wiped away, the candidate remains steady in his position of pure goodness, becomes enlivened by devotional service, and understands the science of God perfectly. Thus, Bhakti Yoga severs the hard knot of material affection and enables one to come at once to the stage of asamsayam samagram, understanding of the Supreme Absolute Truth Personality of Godhead. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 2, verses 17 to 21. So, today we're going to continue our Srimad Bhagavatam recitation and discussion. We are in Canto 1, Chapter 4, verse number 7. Katam va pandave yasya rajarse munina saha samvadaha samabhutata yatraisa satpati shrutihi. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? So he's talking about the great sage, Sukadeva Goswami. And King Parikshit, who was destined to die in 7 days, and so asked the crucial question, now that I know exactly when I'm going to die in a very short period of time, what is my duty at this point? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Srimad Bhagavatam is stated here as the essence of the Vedas. It is not an imaginary story, as it is sometimes considered by unauthorized men. It is also called Sukha Samhita, or the Vedic hymn spoken by Sri Sukadeva Goswami, the great liberated sage. Text 8. He, Sukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Sukadeva Goswami met Emperor Parikshit and explained the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow, and he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher established in the transcendental position. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders, save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Such asking for alms from the householder should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. This is an extremely important point for all persons who are engaged in preaching activities of Krishna consciousness. The devotee naturally has a vow of poverty. That doesn't mean it has to be destitute, but that means that a devotee learns to be satisfied with little in order to have a lot of time for spiritual understanding. And this is explained in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita very elaborately by Krishna to Arjuna. Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjita janagni dagda karma nam tamahu pandita buddhe. And this verse says, 4th chapter, 19th verse, one is understood to be in full knowledge, whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions of work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. So, everyone is working in the material world in order to make a living and have sustained, let's say, income for going to the market and buying food, and paying insurance, buying a house, and that way taking care of the family. And of course, you need a steady income to do that. It can't be sporadic. And because one is making money, if they have not been trained in spiritual life, they'll start spending money on things that they don't really need. And there'll be, like, for example, I remember when I first got married, my wife and I lived in a one-room apartment. I mean, one room. It wasn't a real kitchen, it was just a little kitchenette, but in that one room. In other words, that was it. And so that's all we could afford. So once we had our first child, my wife said, "It's too small here, we need a bigger place." So I said, okay. So we were able to put all our belongings in our car and take it with us to the next apartment, which was a one-bedroom apartment. It wasn't one room now, it was one bedroom plus there was a kitchen, a real kitchen, and there was some kind of a living room. And then we had a second child, and my wife said, "It's too small here, we need a bigger place." I said, okay. This time we had to rent a van to move all the things we had, right? And so we moved into a two-bedroom apartment. And then we had a third child, and my wife said, "Look, this is too small, we have 3 kids now." I said, okay, we'll move. But this time we had to hire a moving company to move everything we had, right? So now we were in a 3-bedroom apartment, right? And then we had a 4th child, and my wife said, "It's too small here. I mean, the kids need a backyard," and I said, okay. So this time we had to we had to hire a big truck to move all the junk we had, right? And we moved into a house, you know, it had a big backyard and had bedrooms and kitchen and this playroom and so many things. And now because we had a yard, we had to get, you know, a rake and a lawnmower and all kinds of things, right? And then, you know, we were buying things that we really didn't need, like, you know, ice cream maker, right? It's a machine, right? And then a bread making machine, so we got that also, right? And then, you know, the washing machine and the dryer and the television, you know, for the education of the kids, right? You know, to watch educational things, you know, and then the videos thing, and then we had to get all kinds, you know, beds, you know, and furniture, and there's dining room, there's this, you know, so in other words, we ended up with a lot of things, and all the junk, you know, like the bread making machine, the ice cream making machine, this thing, that thing, you know. They started piling up in the garage, right? And then, of course, now there were 2 cars, and it was, you know, a big overhead, right? And then we had a 5th child, right? And my wife said, "This house is too small." I said, "What? What do you mean it's too small?" I said, "It's a huge house." She said, "No, it's too small." So then we had to move into a bigger house, right? This time, you know, 2 trucks to move all the junk, you know. And, you know, I had collected a lot of books also. I had a huge library of books. And my wife said, "Well, you don't need all these books." I said, "Well, you don't need this thing." "No, I need that thing." So rather than get into a big argument, we just said, "Okay, well, you take whatever you want, I'll take whatever I want." You know, so, and then we moved into a really big house with a swimming pool. Now that swimming pools cost a lot of money to maintain, you know. And then, you know, the kids have all these, you know, floating things, and then they invite their friends over, and it was like horrible, right? And by this time we had so much junk, and we were attached to it. My wife was attached to her junk, I was attached to my junk, and it, you know, it just kept increasing all the time. So here it says that one is understood to be in full knowledge whose every endeavor is devoid of desire for sense gratification. He is said by sages to be a worker for whom the reactions to work have been burned up by the fire of perfect knowledge. And Srila Prabhupada writes, "Only a person in full knowledge can understand the activities of a person in Krishna consciousness. Because the person in Krishna consciousness is devoid of all kinds of sense gratificatory propensities. It is to be understood that he has burned up the reactions of his work by perfect knowledge of his constitutional position as the eternal servitor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He has actually learned it who has attained to such perfection of knowledge. Development of this knowledge of eternal servitorship to the Lord is compared to fire. Such a fire, once kindled, can burn up all kinds of reactions to work." Now next is Tyakva Karma Phala Sangam Nritya Tripta Nirashraya Karmani Apibavrito Pi Naiva Kinchit Karoti Sa. Abandoning all attachment to the results of his activities, ever satisfied and independent, he performs no fruitive action, although engaged in all kinds of undertakings. So here Prabhupada says, this freedom from the bondage of actions is possible only in Krishna consciousness when one is doing everything for Krishna. A Krishna conscious person acts out of pure love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore he has no attraction for the results of the action. He is not even attached to his personal maintenance, for everything is left to Krishna. Nor is he anxious to secure things, nor to protect things already in his possession. He does his duty to the best of his ability and leaves everything to Krishna. Such an unattached person is always free from the resultant reactions of good and bad. It is as though he were not doing anything. This is the sign of akarma, or actions without fruitive reactions. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness, is binding upon the worker, and that is the real aspect of vikarma, as explained herein before. And the next verse says, Nirasir yatachitatma tyakva sarva parigraha sariram kevalam karma kurvanapnoti kilbasam. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence, perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life, thus working. He is not affected by sinful reactions. So here we see a progressive explanation of a person who is dedicated completely to serving Krishna. Little by little, it's what you would call intelligent downsizing, where let's say the geometric increase of proprietorship is arrested, and all of a sudden you go in the opposite direction by intelligent downsizing, so that one's life becomes very simplified and one's material desires become completely absent and they're replaced by spiritual desires, and one no longer performs any selfish actions. One only acts to please the Lord and through the instructions of the spiritual master. At that point, one's actions are called akarma, actions that have no material reaction, either good or bad, but simply spiritual benefit. Any other action, therefore, devoid of Krishna consciousness is binding upon the worker. So now, such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by sinful reactions. So now Prabhupada says, a Krishna-conscious person does not expect good or bad results in his activities. His mind and intelligence are fully controlled. He knows that because he is part and parcel of the Supreme, the part played by him as a part and parcel of the whole is not his own activity, but is only being done through him by the Supreme. When the hand moves, it does not move out of its own accord, but by the endeavor of the whole body. A Krishna-conscious person is always dovetailed with the supreme desire, for he has no desire for personal sense gratification. He moves exactly like a part of a machine. As a machine part requires oiling and cleaning for maintenance, so a Krishna-conscious man maintains himself by his work just to remain fit for action in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. He is therefore immune to all the reactions of his endeavors. Like an animal, he has no proprietorship even over his own body. A cruel proprietor of an animal sometimes kills the animal in his possession, yet the animal does not protest, nor does it have any real independence. A Krishna-conscious person, fully engaged in self-realization, has very little time to falsely possess any material object. For maintaining body and soul, he does not require unfair means of accumulating money. He does not, therefore, become contaminated by such material sins. He is free from all reactions to his actions. So this is a state of super independence. One is not controlled by material desires. One has only desires to please the Lord. One is not attached to the result. He offers the result to Krishna. One is not in anxiety or in fear because he knows Krishna will protect him and he knows what's going to happen to him. After this life, he'll go back to Godhead. There's no anxiety, there's no fear, there's no trepidation, there's no hesitation. The devotee is always ready to do whatever is the beckoning of Krishna. And what is the beckoning of Krishna? He wants us to come back to him. He wants us to spread his glories. He wants us to bask in the remembrance of his transcendental form, activities, pastimes, and so forth. So then, lastly, yadyucha lavasantusto dvandvad vatito vimatsaraha samaksidav asidho cha kritvapina nibadyate. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. So, if everything is going okay and one is very successful, that is understandable. But if nothing goes all right and one is not successful, that is the real test of Krishna consciousness. Because it's not difficult to imagine someone that's Krishna conscious when everything is going very well. But the real test comes when nothing is going well and there's a lot of difficulty. So when the going gets tough, the tough get going, as they say in English. So the devotee will double down on chanting and following the rules and regulations and not being discouraged and not being negative but always positive about continuing their service to Krishna. So this is a state of liberation. And a devotee is not afraid of failure because as long as one continues devotional service, there's no failure. And therefore it says, a Krishna-conscious person does not make much endeavor even to maintain his body. He is satisfied with gains which are obtained of their own accord. He neither begs nor borrows, but he labors honestly as far as is in his power and is satisfied. Notice it says he labors honestly. Very important point. And is satisfied with whatever is obtained by his own honest labor. So he mentioned the word honest twice here. Right? He is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. So that means sometimes people will criticize you, sometimes they'll put obstacles in your path. The devotee does not blame anyone. He's not, let's say, vindictive. Is not complaining. The devotee simply is focused on doing his service and not letting anything interrupt that. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. So the duality in the material world is what confuses people. But the devotee is not subject to duality because he has one desire. It's when you have two desires that there's duality. But the devotee has only one desire, that is to please Krishna. So whatever is necessary to please Krishna, that's what the devotee does. Whereas a person who is subject to duality, he's thinking, I like this person. I would like to marry this person, but I like this other person also. Maybe I should marry that person. But no, if I marry that person, then I won't be able to be with this person. But if I'm with this person, I won't be with that person. So, they're stuck in the sense of duality, And later on they say, see, I knew it. I should not have married that person. I should have married the other person. See? So the whole life, they're overwhelmed by this duality. Should I work for Amazon or should I work with Microsoft? Should I live in India? No, maybe I should live in the United States. Should I buy this car or should I buy that car? Should I buy this stock or buy that stock? Should I buy this house or should I buy that house? This duality is the only way to get out of it is when one decides, I'm only going to do what is favorable for my continuing in devotional service. So then, one is not subject to duality. One has there's only one desire, that is, whatever is most favorable for serving Krishna, that's what I'm going to do. Okay. So, he is therefore independent in his livelihood. He does not allow anyone's service to hamper his own service in Krishna consciousness. However, for the service of the Lord, he can participate in any kind of action without being disturbed by the duality of the material world. The duality of the material world is felt in terms of heat and cold, or misery and happiness. A Krishna-conscious person is above duality because he does not hesitate to act in any way for the satisfaction of Krishna. Therefore, he is steady both in success and in failure. These signs are visible when one is fully in transcendental knowledge. So these verses are very important. 4th chapter, 19th verse to the 23rd verse, which is Gatasangasya Muktasya Jnanavastita Chetasa Yagya Acharata Karma Samagram Pravilyate. The work of a man who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. So unattached to the modes, just like there's passion, there's goodness, passion, and ignorance, one should not be attached to any of them. One should be attached simply to pleasing Krishna. That's the key. And simply Krishna by serving, by following the instructions of bona fide spiritual masters, Shiksha and Diksha gurus. That should be the one overriding desire in the devotee's mind. So becoming fully Krishna conscious one is freed from all dualities and thus is free from the contaminations of the material modes. See, again, it's talking about being freed from all dualities and also from the contaminations of the material modes. What are the contaminations? Well, someone who's very lusty and they're thinking, oh, I should be a good person. But wait a minute, I want this sense gratification. I don't care about being a good person. I want to have sense gratification, right? So they know what's right, but still they'll do what's wrong because of lustiness. And they'll act whimsically. They know what's right. They know they should do the right thing, but still they'll do the wrong thing. It's because of lust. And lust makes one whimsical. That means, although they know what's right, they still do the wrong thing. He can become liberated because he knows his constitutional position in relationship with Krishna, and thus his mind cannot be drawn from Krishna consciousness. So if we know that our original nature is to be Krishna conscious, it's not to be a sense gratifier in the material world, it's not to be subject to birth, death, old age, and disease, it's not to be always bothered by the modes of material nature, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So in other words, a person who's attached to the mode of goodness, for example, I remember when I got initiated, I was told, now you have to go out and beg dakshina for your guru. Go out, meaning go out in public and beg for your guru. And I was very hesitant to do that because it was sort of like a stigma, I was, most people do not want to go out and beg, right? But I decided to do it anyway because it was my duty. And I went out and I was stopping people, total strangers, saying, look, I was just initiated and I have to collect some dakshina. And they said, what's that? I said, dakshina. I said, I have to collect some money for my guru. I said, well, what do I care about your guru? I don't care about it. What the hell did you stop me for? Are you crazy or what? So, so now I figured I have to say something different. I was trying to be honest with the people. Right? These are total strangers out in the street, right? Anyway, it was very hard. But later on, I learned that I shouldn't be worried about my, prestige or my social standing or anything like that. I should just be surrendered to the service to my spiritual master. And then I got over that and hesitation, and then I started meeting people in the street and saying hello to them, and my name is so-and-so, I'm a devotee of Krishna, and how are you today? And then talking to them. Eventually they would take a book, and we become friends, right? And I give them my telephone number, and tell them, look, anytime you have any questions, give me a call. If you want us to come to your house and do a program, we can do that. So I got over that sense of, wow, this is not dignified, I'm not a beggar. Of course we're beggars. It's begging for the mercy of Krishna. So consequently, whatever he does for Krishna, who is the primeval Vishnu. Therefore, all his works are technically sacrifices because sacrifice aims at satisfying the Supreme Person, Vishnu, or Krishna. The resultant actions to all such work certainly merge into transcendence, and one does not suffer material effects. So there you go. This is now you understand something about Sukadeva Goswami. He's a transcendental person. He was not hampered by dualities. He only had one purpose, and that was to please Krishna, and in the most significant way, by always talking about his transcendental qualities, pastimes, name, bodily features, relationships, and so forth. That's what the Srimad Bhagavatam is. It's uniquely about Krishna. So it says, that Sukadeva Goswami, and now this is the purport to text number 8. Text number 8 says, he, Sukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. So he was not a beggar. He came, usually sages would go to the homes of householders. That doesn't mean that they were rich. They were villagers, basically. And they would beg a little bit of milk. So they would go in the morning early when the morning milking of the cow. And milking a cow lasts maximum half an hour. During that time, they would give spiritual instruction. They would give some instruction about maintaining good health, and then answer any questions. And sometimes they would do some astrological advice also. They were experts in many different fields of knowledge, and they would share that with the simple villagers. And the villagers loved them because they were not greedy, and they didn't ask them for money or anything. They would just take a little bit of milk. And these saintly persons, their main diet was milk. Fresh, whole cream milk from the cows that were protected. It just shows you how nutritious real milk is. And they didn't eat anything else. They would just take a little milk with the butter fat, and that was it. Sukadeva Goswami met Emperor Parikshit and explained the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow, and he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to satisfy the residence by his auspicious sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher established in the transcendental position. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. They're not going to make money. They're not going to become famous. They're not going to try and convince someone to become their disciple or anything like that. They're simply givers. They're giving knowledge. They're giving their association, and they're giving their blessing. Right? And in return, they're receiving like a pint or a quart of milk. That's it. That's all they need to eat in the whole day. The rest of the time, they're preaching, going here, going there, writing, and so forth. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Such asking for alms from the householders should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. Yeah, if he goes to someone's house and becomes attracted by the comforts and the gadgets and the furniture and this thing and that thing, and want in their heart to enjoy those things also, then they're completely violating their mandate, and they become attached, and they can no longer preach effectively. One has to be completely detached from all material amenities in order to be effective in their preaching and their teaching. Verse number 9. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first-class devotee of the Lord, and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him. So we see these questions are being asked, and by Sonaka Rishi and sages in Naimisharanya, to Sutta Goswami, and they want to hear about Maharaj Parikshit. Now they've heard about Sukadev Goswami. Now they want to hear about Maharaj Parikshit. The birth of Maharaj Parikshit is wonderful because in the womb of his mother he was protected by the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna. His activities are also wonderful because he chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. To kill cows means to end human civilization. He wanted to protect the cow from being killed by the great representative of sin. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death, which is wonderful for any mortal being, and thus he prepared himself for passing away by sitting down on the bank of the Ganges and hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. During all the days he heard Bhagavatam, he did not take food or drink, nor did he sleep a moment. So everything about him is wonderful, and his activities are worth hearing attentively. Desire is expressed herein to hear about him in detail. Yeah, the sages want to hear about him, because here's a person who was successful in spiritual life. Even though he was apparently a worldly person, right? He's Maharaj Parikshit. He's king of the entire world at that time. He was king. He inherited the entire kingdom of the Pandavas, which was the whole world, the whole earth that we're living on right now. But yet, he was a great first-class devotee of the Lord. So this is extraordinary. Usually when people are so powerful and rich, they become degraded. They become puffed up. Not the case of Maharaj Parikshit. Everything in his life was exemplary, including his experience of the Lord in the womb of his mother, where Krishna actually, as we'll read later on, mysteriously entered the womb of Uttara and protected him and shrouded him from being burned by the Brahmastra weapon that was detonated by Aswatthama. So this is a very important statement here. To kill cows is to end human civilization. Well, what's happening today? Cows are being killed massively. And what's happening to society all over the world? It's breaking down in a very significant way all over the world. You have riots in Hong Kong. You have war in Somalia. You have war in Ukraine. You have war in Syria. You have war in Iraq. You have war, and you have all kinds of political turmoil in South America, many of the countries. In Chile right now, there's like a revolution going on. You have massive number of people in concentration camps. The Chinese Muslims, you have over 1 million of them in concentration camps, being tortured to give up their belief in Islam. You have, all over the place, you have problems. All Africa, you have in the United States, trying to impeach the President of the United States. You know, so everywhere there's turmoil. And every day in the newspapers, you go all over the United States, it's crazy things happening. You know, people killing each other, and people are drunk and driving into somebody and killing them, right? An Indian man was killed 4 nights ago, just crossing the street in Bellevue. Some guy ran him over, completely killed him, an older man, and the next day he was going back to India, right? The grandfather or father came to visit his kids, and he's dead. So things are happening all over the world, everywhere, and in Sammamish, everywhere. Things are happening, very strange things and tragic things. And why is that happening? Well, to kill cows means to end human civilization. There's massive cow killing. In India, massive cow killing. You know, they're trying to stop it now, but it got out of hand. They reduced the cow population in India from 900 million. That's almost Yeah, that's not, no, let's see, 900 million. 1,000, yeah, it's almost 1 billion cows. Now it's 130, 140,000. I mean, it's no, is it 900 million? Yeah, 900 million. It's only 1 million. No, it wasn't 900 million. I'm sorry. Anyway, no, it was. It's only 130 million cows right now in India. It used to be 900 million. And that's in, I think, a 30-year period. So that is massive cow slaughter. And obviously, India is one of the major exporters of meat. Right? So Prabhupada says, to kill cows means to end human civilization. So how's everything going on in India? How's everything going on in India? Is everything all right there? No, there are a lot of problems in India. You know, same kind of problems that are here. You know, murder, there's divorce, there's you know, tsunamis, there's penury of water, this thing, that thing. Farmers are committing suicide because of debt. You know, so to kill cows means to end human civilization. We have to understand how important it is to protect cows. People think that's not so important. We need industry. We need, you know, an atomic bomb. We have to protect ourselves from the Chinese and this. You know. Wait a minute. We need to stop killing cows and protect them. That's what we need, and we need to stop, you know, drinking liquor. I mean, India has a liquor problem, right? It was never there before, and stop smoking biddies and cigarettes and stop gambling and stop AIDS. You have an AIDS epidemic in India, right? If you go down the list of all the things that are going wrong in the land of Dharma, it's frightening. Yeah. So 900 million is almost 1 billion. Oh, in the world, okay. Right now? Well, what was their, I mean, 30 years ago, what was their population of cows? 90 billion. Well, maybe at one time, Krishna's time. Anyway, we get the idea that there's a malaise, you know, because to kill cows means to end human civilization. So also, Prabhupada says in this first canto, he writes a lot about cows in this first canto. And another place. See, that's why we have to understand the importance of cow protection. Okay, so in the Canto 1, Chapter 16. Once, when Maharaj Parikshit was on his way to conquer the world, he saw the master of Kali Yuga, who was lower than a Sudra, disguised as a king and herding the legs of a cow and bull. The king at once caught hold of him to deal sufficient punishment. The purpose of a king's going out to conquer the world is not for self-aggrandizement. Maharaj Parikshit went out to conquer the world after his ascendance to the throne, but this was not for the purpose of aggression on other states. He was the emperor of the world, and all small states were already under his regime. His purpose in going out was to see how things were going on in terms of the godly state. The king, being the representative of the Lord, has to execute the will of the Lord duly. There is no question of self-aggrandizement. Self-aggrandizement is a big word. It means for your own benefit, for his own benefit, material benefit, by collecting things like houses and cars and countries and so forth, right? Thus, as soon as Maharaj Parikshit saw that a lower-class man in the dress of a king was hurting the legs of a cow and bull, he at once arrested and punished him. The king cannot tolerate insults to the most important animal, the cow, nor can he tolerate disrespect for the most important man, the Brahmana. Human civilization means to advance the cause of Brahminical culture and to maintain it. Cow protection is essential. There is a miracle in milk, for it contains all the necessary vitamins to sustain human physiological conditions for higher achievements. Brahminical culture can advance only when man is educated to develop the quality of goodness, and for this there is a prime necessity for food prepared with milk, fruits, and grains. Maharaj Parikshit was astonished to see that a black Sudra, dressed like a ruler, was mistreating a cow, the most important animal in human society. The age of Kali means mismanagement and quarrel, and the root cause of all mismanagement and quarrel is that worthless men with the modes of lower-class men, who have no higher ambition in life, come to the helm of the state management. Such men at the post of a king are sure to first hurt the cow and the Brahminical culture, thereby pushing all society towards hell. Maharaj Parikshit, trained as he was, got the scent of this root cause of all quarrel in the world. Thus he wanted to stop it in the very beginning. What was the scent that he got? He saw that this unqualified person was torturing a cow and a bull, and he was ready to kill him on the spot. That's how important the cow is. The cow is necessary for Brahminical culture and for the health of the people. And by caring for cows, all auspiciousness comes to the person that does it and to everyone around that person. So we should realize the importance of cow protection. It's one of our duties in Krishna consciousness. Just as respecting brahmanas is our duty, respecting elderly persons is our duty, respecting women, respecting children, protecting them, it's our duty. Okay, so text number 10. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast till death? Well, fasting till death is actually a very auspicious thing. At the end of one's life, usually great personalities will stop eating. Prabhupada did that. He basically didn't eat for like 6 months. But he did it voluntarily, you know. And when we say he didn't eat, he would fast for many days. Sometimes he would take just a little bit of something, not much. Right? And basically his body became thinner and thinner. He did it voluntarily. All great personalities, when they know that, and they can choose when they're going to die, they will stop eating. And even ordinary persons, at a certain point, when they get older and they know they're going to die, they just stop eating. Right. Maharaj Parikshit was the emperor of the world and all the seas and oceans, and he did not have to take the trouble to acquire such a kingdom by his own effort. He inherited it from his grandfathers, Maharaj Yudhisthira and brothers. Besides that, he was doing well in the administration and was worthy of the good name of his forefathers. Consequently, there was nothing undesirable in his opulence and administration. Then why should he give up all these favorable circumstances and sit down on the bank of the Ganges, fasting till death? This is astonishing, and therefore all were eager to know the cause. Yeah, when a person is so successful, why would he want to fast till death? It's very interesting. Text number 11. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet. All his enemies. And surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed insuperable kingly opulences. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There was nothing undesirable in his life. He was quite a young man and could enjoy life with power and opulence. So there was no question of retiring from active life. There was no difficulty in collecting the state taxes because he was so powerful and chivalrous that even his enemies would come to him and bow down at his feet and surrender all wealth for their own benefit. Maharaj Parikshit was a pious king. He conquered his enemies, and therefore the kingdom was full of prosperity. There was enough milk, grains, and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. So materially, everything was satisfactory. Therefore, there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were eager to hear about all this. You notice it says, the rivers and mountains were full of potency. Very important. When a river is full of potency, that means it flows very quickly. Its waters are cool. They're not heated. There's a cover of trees to protect it from the scorching sun. It's meandering like this. And its waters are oxygenated and alive, and the river is full of life, full of life. When the river gets heated, when there's not protective cover of trees and things, when its course is artificially made to go straight and not to meander, right? By works on by embankments and things like that. When it moves slowly, then it does not support a lot of life. And the water is heavy. It's not light. It's not oxygenated. So it's basically becomes a dead river. So when the rivers are potent, they have 7 certain qualities that are representative of its potency. The fact that it meanders like this, the water movement has vortex type of movement, and waves and vortexes. It's oxygenated. It's cool. It's like 38 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal temperature for living water and so forth. There's a whole technology of living water, and then the mountains and the rivers are potent. So the mountains are the source of minerals and that fertilize the land. Rivers flood. It's normal that they flood. When they flood, they bring the silt from the mountains, and it's like a new topsoil. When they try and stop the rivers flooding, all that goes into the ocean, and then now you have to buy fertilizers and different things, So anyway, you get the idea. When they throw too much toxic stuff into rivers, like I was reading, there's several rivers in India that are so toxic that if you go into them, you can die. And there are other places in the world too like that. Things have become so toxic. So, why would such a person, so powerful, so wealthy, so famous, and young, and pious, why would he want to voluntarily fast to death at a young age? So, text number 12. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the emperor, Parikshit, was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was shelter for others? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Parikshit Maharaj was an ideal king and householder because he was a devotee of the personality of Godhead. A devotee of the Lord automatically has all good qualifications, and the emperor was a typical example of this. Personally, he had no attachment for all the worldly opulences in his possession. But since he was king for the all-around welfare of his citizens, he was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, but also for the next. In other words, he was helping people prepare to go back to Godhead in his kingdom. He would not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish and partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness: men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. He was not selfishly interested. Selfishness is either self-centered or self-extended. So self-centered means myself and my family. Self-extended means myself, my family, my uncles, my aunties, my cousins, my people. Right. But the other people, I don't care about them. You know. So it's either self-centered or self-extended. He was neither. His interest was to please the Supreme Truth, Personality of Godhead. The king is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and therefore the king's interest must be identical with that of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. Therefore the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. Hence, the activities of the citizens should be so coordinated that they can, at the end, go back home, back to Godhead. Under the administration of a representative king, the kingdom is full of opulence. At that time, human beings need not eat animals. There are ample food, grains, milk, fruit, and vegetables, so that the human beings, as well as the animals, can eat sumptuously and to their heart's content. If all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter and obey the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Emperor Parikshit was a worthy king, and therefore all were happy during his reign. Now we see the value of a genuine devotee being king or a leader. Therefore, everyone becomes happy. But he cannot be self-interested. He has to be interested. His duty as an ideal king is that he has no attachment for all the wealth and opulences in his possession. But he's king for the all-around welfare of his citizens. And he was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, but also for the next. So what is the greatest welfare work? Krishna consciousness, because you can get the most precious result, eternal life. No more birth, death, old age, and disease. What welfare work can offer you that today, right? They can their welfare work is they'll give you a tiny house and food stamps, right? Tiny house. You know what a tiny house is? Less than 100 square feet, right? And you don't have a toilet, you have a honey bucket, right? And there's no kitchen. You have to go to you have to go panhandle to buy some food, to eat something. So what kind of welfare is that? That's maybe it's better than sleeping in the street, but it's not much better. So no, Maharaj Parikshit was a real king. And here he says, if all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter, and obey the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Emperor Parikshit was a worthy king, and therefore all were happy during his reign. So, what is the problem then? Well, we have low-class people that have become leaders of society, whether it's in city government, state government, or federal government. They're low-class people. They're meat eaters. They think it's okay to kill animals and eat them. And they think it's okay to educate children and become atheists. And they think it's okay to philander and do all kinds of nonsense. And therefore there's havoc in society. So what we need are ideal leaders. And how does a person become an ideal leader? Well, first of all, they have to lead themselves ideally. You start with at home. So one should be ideal in eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, and being like Maharaj Parikshit, interested in the welfare of all. So what does Bhagavatam say in the first verse? It says that the highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the welfare of all. There you go. That should be our motto in life. The highest truth is to be able to distinguish between reality and illusion for the welfare of all. Right? If one person can do that, then they can help many thousands and millions of other people. Right? Okay, so then he was a king for the all-around welfare of his citizens. He was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life, but also for the next. He would not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish and partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. See, nowadays, you have, like in the state of Oregon, assisted suicide. Did you know that? Yeah, it's legal. You can have someone kill themselves. You have to do it through a doctor. And, huh? What? Yeah, it's 3.5 hours from here. If you want to commit suicide, you can do it legally there, and someone will help you. Doctor will help you. Jai Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki Jai. So, you can have assisted suicide in Oregon. You can also have an abortion, not only in Oregon, but all over everywhere in the United States. So they're killing the old people, they're killing the babies. What kind of culture is that? And they're killing the cows. They started with killing the cows, now they're killing the old people, and they're killing babies. So what kind of a society is that? And it's legal. You can do it. Okay, so next, text 13. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. Okay, now let's read this again. So they're addressing Sutta Goswami, and they say, we know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas. Very interesting statement. We're going to find out what that is. And thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The difference between the Vedas and the Puranas is like that between the Brahmanas and the Parivrajakakas. The Brahmanas and the Parivrajakakas. The Brahmanas are meant to administer some fruitive sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas. but the Parivrajakacharyas, or learned preachers, are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. As such, the Parivrajacacharya is a saintly person who always travels and preaches. Right? As such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras, which are practiced systematically by accent and meter by the Brahmanas, who are meant for administrating Vedic rites. Yet it should not be considered that the Brahmanas are more important than the itinerant preachers. They are one and different simultaneously because they are meant for the same end in different ways. There is no difference also between the Vedic mantras and what is explained in the Puranas and Itihasa. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, it is mentioned in the Madhyandina Shruti that all the Vedas, namely the Sama, Atharva, Rig, Yajur, Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, etc., are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being. The only difference is that the Vedic mantras are mostly begun with Pranava Omkara, and it requires some training to practice the metric pronunciation of the Vedic mantras. But that does not mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is of less importance than the Vedic mantras. On the contrary, it is the ripened fruit of all the Vedas, as stated before. Besides that, the most perfectly liberated soul, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, is absorbed in the studies of the Bhagavatam, although he is already self-realized. Srila Sutta Goswami is following his footsteps, and therefore his position is not the least less important, because he was not expert in chanting Vedic mantras with metric pronunciation, which depends more on practice than actual realization. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. Okay. So, and that's a fact. I mean, the Brahmanas, the South Indian Brahmanas, they can chant the Vedas much better, the mantras much better than we can. We, of course, chant Hare Krishna mostly, and they can chant all the different Vedas. And why are they doing it? They're doing it in order to perform Vedic ritualistic sacrifices. But most of those Vedic ritualistic sacrifices are not really meant to please Krishna, although originally they were meant to please Krishna. But they're doing it for the material benefit of the people. So there's a difference here between practicing Vedic or reciting Vedic mantras for the material benefit of people, or teaching Vedic knowledge for the spiritual benefit of people. So the Parivrajakacharyas, or the itinerant preachers, are preaching for the spiritual upliftment of the people, so that they can go back to Godhead. And the Vedic mantra chanters are doing ritual performances for material benefit in the material world. So therefore, it says here that we know that you're expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas. So what is he talking about? What portions of the Vedas? The Karmakanda portions, where there are so many Vedic rituals for material benefit, or basically Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So this was the problem with Vyasadeva. He spent more time talking about Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha than talking about pure love of Krishna. So therefore he obscured the knowledge that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead because of the overwhelming abundance of information about ritualistic performances, mundane religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and temporary liberation, or you call it qualified liberation, qualified. So going up to Swarga instead of going back to Vaikuntha. So the itinerant preachers, or Parivrajakacharyas, they're meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. They don't discriminate. They don't say, well, what is your gotra? No, they don't ask you what your gotra is. They say, what is your question? Well, I want to know why I'm suffering. Oh, that's a valid question. We can explain that to you. So the preachers, such as Sukadeva Goswami, their main interest is helping people go back to Godhead. They're not here to help people. They're not like a coach to coach you how to do better in your business or how to live more compatibly in your marriage, like the marriage counselors do. And if it looks like you're not compatible, then they say, well, better you get a divorce. So everything is materially motivated. There's no actual spiritual emphasis. It's quasi-spiritual, as they say in English. Quasi means it looks like it, but it's not really it. Okay, so we'll do one more and we'll stop. On verse number 14, Sutta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parasara in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu. Okay, so now it's going to get into appearance of Vyasadeva. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There is a chronological order of the four millenniums, namely Satya, Dwapara, Tretya, Kali. That's the normal sequence. Satya is the first, Dwapara is second, and Tretya the third, and Kali the fourth. But sometimes there is overlapping. During the regime of Vaivaswata Manu, who's the seventh Manu, the Manu that's there now, there was an overlapping of the 28th round of the four millenniums. And the third millennium appeared prior to the second. In that particular millennium, Lord Sri Krishna also descends. And because of this, there was some particular alteration. The mother of the great sage was Satyavati, meaning mother of Vyasadeva was Satyavati, the daughter of the Vasu fisherman, and the father was the great Parasara Muni. That is the history of Vyasadeva's birth. Every millennium is divided into 3 periods, and each period is called a Sandhya. Vyasadeva appeared in the 3rd Sandhya of that particular age. So, the 28th round, there was an overlapping of the 28th round of the 4 millenniums. So the one round of 4 millenniums is called a kalpa. So here we see that Krishna appears also in the 28th round of the 4 millenniums during the period of the 7th Manu, Vaivaswata Manu. So in one Manu's life, there's like 72 and a half cycles of 4 ages. And, huh? What? 14. 14 Manus in the day of Brahma, right? And then sometimes there's an overlapping. And in that overlapping period where Dwapara comes 3rd and Tretya comes 2nd, Lord Krishna appears. Very interesting. A lot of complicated things, mysterious and complicated things that we will not completely understand now, but there's a possibility we will understand it in the future. Okay, so we'll stop right there. Are there any questions, comments? There was a lot of importance about cow protection. Also, Prabhupada explains, when we get to the 16th chapter, Prabhupada writes a lot about cow protection. The rishis in those days, meaning the time of Maharaj Parikshit, could not even imagine that in the advanced days of the age of Kali, the lowest of Sudras would be elected as administrators and will open organized slaughterhouses for killing cows. They couldn't even imagine it. Anyway, although hearing about a Sudraka who was a cheat and insulter of a cow was not very interesting to the great rishis, they nevertheless wanted to hear about it to see if the event had any connection with Lord Krishna. They were simply interested in the topics of Lord Krishna, for anything that is dovetailed with the narration of Krishna is worth hearing. There are many topics in the Bhagavatam about sociology, politics, economics, cultural affairs, etc., but all of them are in relation with Krishna, and therefore all of them are worth hearing. Krishna is the purifying ingredient in all matters, regardless of what they are. In the mundane world, everything is impure due to its being a product of the three mundane qualities. The purifying agent, however, is Krishna. Haribol. So, no questions? Yes. Yeah.
One of the meaning, as you explaining, that they are trying to glorify, saying that you are so exalted that you haven't read the lower portion of the Vedas, like Kanisaka. Can there be other meaning also? Why they are emphasizing that? I mean, if I'm trying to glorify my Guru, right, who I'm listening from, why I would say except some portion? I would say that you are so learned and you can do all this.
Well, it says here that the fact that it says here that the only difference is that the Vedic mantras are mostly begun with pranava om kara, and it requires some training to practice the metric pronunciation of the Vedic mantras. But that does not mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is of less importance than the Vedic mantras. On the contrary, it is the ripened fruit of the Vedas, as stated before. So have you ever heard the Brahmanas here in Seattle, for example? Are they reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam? No. No, they're not. They're reciting, the Rig Veda or Sama Veda or whatever, right? So, and they do very well, metrically and so forth. But they're doing it not exactly to glorify Krishna, but rather to help people, in Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. So why would Sukadev Goswami spend his time trying to do that? Are we spending our time trying to recite the Vedic mantras in a very precise way? No. We're spending our time chanting Hare Krishna and hearing the Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita and trying to understand the philosophy of pure devotional service and engaging in actual service. So why would he spend that time? It takes you some time to be expert to chant Vedic mantras. But in any case, even the ones that spend so much time chanting the Vedic mantras, they don't say them correctly anyway. In Kali Yuga.
He's expert in meaning of all the purpose. He knows the purpose.
Yes.
But explain the purpose.
Well, he's not spending his time chanting the mantras metrically and pronouncing correctly and all that. He's rather explaining the meaning of all subjects, as you said, and it's right there in the verse. Yeah, I mean, we only have so much time in life. What are we going to spend that time on, right?
So there are some organizations in India, they focus on memorizing entire Gita like that. I mean, but generally they don't understand the meaning of it. They just
Yeah, it's just like reciting the Ramcharitmanas. In 24 hours they recite the whole thing, but yet they're still engaged in nonsense activities. You know? I mean, it's nice that they do that, but they chant it so fast. I mean, they don't. There's no way that they can understand what's being said. Very few people actually understand.
So then in ISKCON we focus more on the meaning and how we can apply the teaching.
Well, this is the thing between the Catholic Church or the Orthodox Church and the Protestant Church. The Protestant Church focuses completely on Bible, the meaning. They're not interested so much in the rituals. They might have a few rituals, but very, very few. Whereas the Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church are very strict about the ritualistic performances. You know, and they also talk about it. They also read the Bible, but it's not like the whole emphasis is the Bible. The emphasis is what's called the Eucharist, the Sunday ritual performance. And they believe that anyone that takes part in that ritual performance, they get enlightened by the ritual. So the same way, I remember this one person passed away, and they asked me to speak at the funeral, but then they invited a pundit to do some rituals. So I know the pundit very well, so I asked him, what rituals are you doing? You know, he had to make a little fire and everything. So we're leading the soul back to Vaikuntha, he said. We're trying to help them get to Vaikuntha. Now, the person who died was not very religious at all, you know, but they were from that tradition, you know, South Indian Vaishnava tradition. So I was thinking to myself, you know, they were explaining, people were talking about the person who died, you know, and you could see that they were not a very religious person, you know. I mean, they were not a bad person, but they were not very religious. I had never seen this person at the temple, and I don't think that person went to any other temple either, or very rarely. And then he's telling me, you know, we're directing the soul back to Vaikuntha by the ceremony. So I didn't say anything, you know. I mean, obviously, it's some traditional thing, so that's good. But it's better to, you know, while a person is still breathing, right, they can come and learn, you know, the importance of devotional service. And this was a person who was, the one distinctive thing about this person, they would always go jogging. Jogging, yeah. So you see, people can get caught up in material life, and other people can do rituals, right? Like, for example, there was once a donkey that fell down in a well in the village. So the people called all the Brahmins. The Brahmins came, and they did a yajna for 1 week. At the end of the yajna, an old Brahmin came and said, "Okay, guys, you did a very good job. Now, which one of you is going to go down and pull the donkey up?" So, you see, just because you did a ritual doesn't mean you solved the problem, right? There's more to it than simply doing the ritual. So, in the same way, why would he spend so much time learning to chant the mantras on Karmakanda mantras in metric time? rather than just go and instruct people the meaning and the real purpose of these mantras. Right? So the Vaishnava saints, like Sukadeva Goswami, may not be expert in chanting the mantras, Vedic mantras, but they're expert in explaining the meaning and giving a real example of it. Was Maharaj Parikshit an expert in chanting the Vedic mantras? No. But he was the ideal king and devotee. Arjuna also. By the way, Arjuna never did any asanas or pranayamas. He never did yoga. But he's considered the greatest yogi. So there's a difference between ritualistic following and actual devotional service. Now, are those ritualistic mantras, what's their purpose? The same purpose, to glorify the Lord. But one can get confused as to the purpose, and it's so confusing that you come down to modern times, you have the Satyanarayana Puja. In the beginning of the puja, the priest will say to the person who's performing, who's asked for the Satyanarayana Puja, will say, now repeat mama. So mama means for me, right? Now is that the purpose of the sacrifice? You see? So they completely have perverted the whole thing. And people actually believe that, this is for success in my business, my family, my health, my this, my that, my kids, and so forth. And therefore, all they're doing is increasing the time they spend in the cycle of birth and death. They're not going to get liberation if they're doing rituals for their own benefit. Yes. Well, it depends what their purpose is. Everything depends on the motive. If the motive is to make a living by chanting mantras, then it's not going to really purify their heart. See, you notice it said here, and we went through those verses in the 4th chapter, right? Now, it says here, and we read it, and this is very interesting. Sukadeva Goswami was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour at the time of milking the cow, and he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Sukadeva Goswami is an ideal preacher established in a transcendental position from his activities. Those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. It doesn't say to chant the Vedic mantras correctly for their benefit, Such asking for alms from the householders should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. So in other words, if a person becomes, let's say, a servant of a rich person and panders to their whims, then it's worse than committing suicide or drinking poison, because they become attached to associating with people who are rich and who can lavish money on them and then ask them for favors so that they can make more money and things like that. So a person loses his spiritual potency, his or her spiritual potency, by being attracted to opulence. Right? Yeah. What do you think? The Muslims care about cow protection? No. No.
They also have a sense came in their land.
They what?
That Muhammad came and then 10 people.
No, they have, the Jews and the Muslims have dietary rules, strict dietary rules. You're not allowed to eat pig, for example. But you can eat cow. You can eat sheep. You can eat chicken. You're just not allowed to eat a pig. But how can you eat them? You have to have them sacrificed in a specific way. So that's called halal meat. So, the priest has to sacrifice the animal for you. And very few people follow all the rules. Some do, but most don't follow the rules anymore. And Christians definitely don't follow any rules anymore. Muslims follow to a certain extent, and Jews follow to a certain extent. But what are they doing? They're still eating cows.
So in the Bible, nobody ever talk about cow.
No, they talk about how that you can kill the cow. You're just not allowed. What? How do you know that? How do you know that? What? Who wrote that article? What's it say? Huh? What? Had asked Muslims not to eat beef. Who wrote that? Well, how come they're eating beef then? How come when they massacre Hindus, first they force them to eat meat? No, Hazrat Ali, he was somewhat of a vegetarian. Muhammad, he was son-in-law or something of Muhammad. But Muhammad, I mean, they were living in the desert, right? So their main animal was the camel. They would drink camel milk and eat dates, things like that. And, sacrificing a cow was something that, killing cows, the cows were valuable. They needed the bulls for working the land and the cow for getting milk. I mean, even villagers before, they wouldn't eat much cow meat because the cow was a valuable animal. Who said in that article? You ask any Muslim, did Muhammad not order you not to eat cows? They would say no. Not one that I know would say yes. But maybe there are some. I mean, there's always some exceptions, but there is a chapter of the Quran called the cow. Yeah. But it doesn't say don't eat the cow. It just called it, No, the Muslims are meat eaters. You go on the internet, you'll see many videos of Muslims killing cows for Ramadan. They'll show you. You can see it on, I mean, you don't want to see that, it's horrible, but there are many videos of them killing cows. Okay, so your question was, do they talk about protecting cows? I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything. That doesn't mean nothing exists, but I don't know much about it. Jesus was born in a sect of Jews that were vegetarians. And in the beginning of Christianity, there was a big debate about whether they should eat meat or not. But once they convinced kings to become Christians, they gave up the thing about being vegetarian. So if you read about early Christianity, there were many Christians who were vegetarians. Because Jesus was born in a sect of Jews that were vegetarians. But then it changed. But Prabhupada says, 7th Canto Srimad Bhagavatam, that when Jesus saw the slaughter of animals in the Temple of David, which was the main temple in Jerusalem of the Jews, he was disgusted. And therefore he overturned the tables of the money changers in the temple that were changing money so people could buy animals in the local currency to sacrifice. And he got so disgusted that he started a new religion called Christianity, in which he was teaching people not to kill cows and not to kill animals for slaughter. And but then it changed, and now they're wholesale killing cows. So over time, things deteriorate. It can happen in ISKCON also, unless we follow strictly. So that's why Prabhupada wrote all these scriptures, right? I mean, he can't be more explicit than this. He says, when they start killing cows, it's the end of human civilization, right? You can't be more explicit than that. So is there anything like this in other scriptures of the Christians, Jews? No. No way. Nothing like explicit like this. Okay, so we will stop there. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So you should read the next 13 to what? 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 for next week. And you should do some research, a research project or homework. Research all the quotes Prabhupada makes about cows. There are many quotes. You can go on Vanipedia and type in cows in a search engine. You'll come up with many, many quotes. You should print them out, bring them in, and we can discuss it. You see how important cow protection is and how much Prabhupada emphasized it. And that's why we're trying to do it. Yeah, one devotee today gave me $5,500 for cow protection. Yeah. He said this is specific for cow protection. Haribo, Haribo. Well, it's, in other words, we don't just preach to Brahmins, we preach to everybody. They were kind to all